Welcome to Michigan Sports Media Network. Today I have our lead Tigers reporter, Brad Thompson, with us, and our lead Red Wings reporter, James Gullett, as well. Thankfully, the Pistons are good again, folks. I am excited. The whole city of Detroit is excited about it. It really seems like similar to that resurgence the Lions had. It's a bit different way because Brad Holmes had to take his lumps the first few years, even after, drafting well and doing all that. It's a bit harder, in my opinion, to build a football team than it is a basketball team, just for the number of players you need, really. But Langdon came in. He didn't make any, splash moves. He didn't come in and trade for Brandon Ingram or sign, the biggest guy, our biggest name guy. But what he did was he added Tobias Harris, which I was not a big fan of. I'm still lukewarm on it. I think he added what he needed to add, but for $25 million a year, I don't know if that's really worth it. But that's a conversation for another time. He's doing what he needs to do right now, and that's really all we can hope for at the end of the day. And then he obviously added, Malik Beasley for probably the best contract in the NBA right now, period. I don't really think it's close either. For 1 year, $6 million, he's averaging almost 20 a game, and he's leading the entire NBA in 3-pointers. So just from that standpoint, probably the best contract in the NBA. And then, he drafted Ron Holland, which, when you kind of look at those moves, it's like, but when you put them together and you add it to, and you know what? Stephen A. Smith got slammed for saying this the other day, but I'm going to say it here. Our last GM, for some reason, his name is slipping my mind.
Troy Weaver.
Troy Weaver, yeah, from OKC, actually, my number one team, but we won't tell them that. But Troy Weaver, he came and he drafted Cade Cunningham. He drafted Jalen Duren. He drafted Asar Thompson. He drafted Jaden Ivey. I mean, if you think about it that way, obviously he didn't have, the immediate impact we would have helped as a GM, and he really wasn't that great as a trader. I think we can kind of all agree on that. But what he did was he set a foundation that Langdon came in, said, okay, we need this, we need that, we need this, add it to this group, and now we are winning. So it's just great. It's great to see Detroit basketball, back at it again. Obviously, we were on a 8 game win streak, and then lost to, I believe it was the Nuggets who knocked us off that pedestal there. It's amazing right now. We're over 30 wins. I think we doubled last year's wins by January, like halfway through January, if I'm not mistaken, which isn't hard to do when you only win 14 games, but pretty cool to see. And then obviously, we have the resurgence, or not the resurgence, I should say, the surgence, or the coming of Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson right before our very eyes right now. And obviously, I've been a big fan of Jalen Duren's for a long time. A lot of people hated him up until this season, it seemed like. I've always really been a fan of his. Thompson on the same level. I think, and we'll talk about this in a second on the panel. I think Thompson has like Kawhi Leonard type of a peak. If he can get a jump shot, we're talking about like one of the best players in the league. And then, obviously Jaden Ivey is still injured, but the Pistons are 21-9 since January 1st without Jaden Ivey. Now, I personally am very excited to see him back. There's no real timetable yet on his return. Back in February, early February, people were saying most likely early to mid March. Right now, it's sounding more like late March, which is smart. They shouldn't, risk, pushing him too far or too fast, I should say, because we're doing pretty good right now without him. And then last but not least, JB Bickerstaff is coach of the year. I mean, I don't really see, maybe the Cavs, they have a little bit of an argument, but I would say what Detroit has done, right, in terms of wins over expected, is way more than what Cleveland has done. And I think that kind of puts that into perspective. Obviously, the Cavs are killing it right now, but they're probably 10 wins, 15 wins ahead of where we thought they would be. And the Pistons are like doubling to tripling their win total of what we thought it would be. But with that being said, I will pass it over to James, if you have anything to add on that.
I was going to mention Bickerstaff as coach of the year, but you covered that pretty well. If we're using, and I know it is a different sport, but if we are using the criteria of wins above expected, which is pretty much the only reason Dan Campbell did not win coach of the year because the Lions were expected to win, that makes Bickerstaff, in my opinion, the runaway favorite as long as we are applying the same formula to each sport. And then, as you said, I am extremely excited to get Ivy back, but to echo your sentiment, there's no hurry. We are 12-3 the last 15 games, even with that Denver loss. Let the good times roll. Let him heal up. I don't want him back until he is fully healthy because and last I looked, I believe the Pistons have a 95% chance to make the playoffs. So let's bring Ivy back when he's ready and not forced. So that way we can have him at his top potential.
Yeah, and that's really good points you brought up there. Brad, anything to add there?
Well, yeah, I could be wrong, but I think Bickerstaff was coach of the year last year with Cleveland. I
I'm
could
not
be,
recalling. I can't remember,
yeah,
but
I believe he was, and he was let go, much like Dwayne Casey was. So I do find that interesting, but I think it's all he is coach of the year. But Detroit Weaver, he can hold his feet over the flames for Killian Hayes when you have a pick that high. And granted, he did leave Tyrese Halliburton on the board there. I when you hire Monty Williams and you keep going after him and going after him, and Williams just keeps saying no, 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 and then finally you throw so much damn money at him. And yes, granted, that's a little bit on Tom Gores too, at least 50-50, hell, maybe even a little bit more on Gores. But it's amazing what a coach can do. All right, and he identified Bickerstaff, and he got him. He picked up, and this is not an indictment on Weaver. I'm singing, throwing bouquets over Langdon right now. You sign Beasley, who was a steal. You sign Hardaway. You get Tobias Harris. You could bring those three in. It's not flashy, but look what it's doing. You've got some mentors there. I mean, Beasley is, if we don't re-sign him, I would be shocked. Right now, Cade is playing with Duren in a 1-2 game right now that is frankly off the charts. Their chemistry is it's amazing what they're doing right now. They are arguably outside of LeBron and Luka. They might be the best 1-2 punch going right now. So I really like that. And I saw Thompson, with Booker, being, all of a sudden disgruntled, and him and Budenholzer not vibing. Everybody says, "Oh, Pistons." He's from Muskegon. He loves the Detroit teams. I was on that bandwagon at first too now, but I'm saying to myself, this team is doing so damn well. You don't really want to rip it out too fast. You don't want to gut it because Asir Thompson, James Wilkins, who is a highly regarded NBA uh, gentleman, said, "I knew Kobe, and Kobe was one of a kind." He said, "But these Thompson twins," meeting Asir's brother, said, "I haven't seen anybody work harder at the game other than Kobe." And that's about as high praise as it gets. So you've got, I mean, if you go in with a core of Thompson, Duren, Cade, Beasley, because Tobias and Hardaway are getting a little long in the tooth, but then you also have Holland, you also have Sasser. You start getting it's going to be a destination. People are going to want to play with Cade now. Cade is box office. He is going to be second team All NBA just based on the fact that he's got to pay his dues. Should probably be first team. I think anybody would take second team All NBA at the start of the season. People are going to want to play with him. We do have a tradition. All right, so future is sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. Milwaukee can win a title in that town. Believe me, Detroit, we can win a title here again too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Especially with the Devin Booker stuff, like a lot of people have kind of been saying, give whatever it takes to get him. And I'm still on the camp of making a move for him would be a good idea. But I also agree with you that it's not worth blowing this thing up for. I personally think Asar Thompson's, untouchable right now. There's really not many people I would trade him for. I mean, obviously the top 10 guys in the league, yeah. But other than that, it's kind of hard. Especially just because what we've seen from him offensively this year. If he can get that jump shot going, we're going to be on a much better path. But if we don't get Booker, we still need to make a move, right? And I think that there's potential that, a Kevin Durant move could happen. And I think it would take a lot less than Booker. I think if you gave, Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey, and maybe another young player not named Thompson or Duren or Holland. I think you might be able to get that done if you give him a first or two, because he's got a 1 year deal. He's getting into the end of his prime, which who knows with LeBron playing like what he is at 40, if Kevin Durant will really drop off. But you're essentially getting a rental. And I think that a lot of teams look at Durant that way. And I think, there's a lot of teams that might give up more, but I think it would have to come with a contract extension. And obviously, there's some other guys, as we go on. I've heard some LaMelo Ball is available talks, um, which I don't know if I'd really want to give up what it would take to get LaMelo to then kind of mess up the stuff with Cade. Because really with Cade, what we need is a secondary ball handler who can shoot off the catch. Like genuinely, we don't need somebody like LaMelo who's going to come in and he's used to being the number one, or even a Booker. I think Booker would fit a little better just because he's played with KD for so long. But with that being said, I will pass it over to you, James, if you got anything to add.
The only thing I wanted to add, and I'm not trying to rain on any parades, I just like getting the facts right, is Bickerstaff unfortunately did not win Coach of the Year last year. That was Oklahoma City Thunder's coach that won it
Ah,
last year. But you're also probably just referring to our last two coaches, because Dwayne Casey in 2018 won Coach of the Year before we hired him, and then Monty Williams won Coach of the Year before we hired him. So we did hire
yeah, okay,
two Coaches of the Year in a row, but we did not make it three. But
gotcha.
so like you're right there. I just want to make sure that we had the facts on that. And then in terms of like Jay said, I would love to add in theory, and if this was um, Xbox, I would love to add LiAngelo Ball to the roster, but that would shake way too much chemistry. You hit the nail on the head. He's the primary ball handler. When he's on the court, the offense runs through him, and we already got that in Cade. So we need to find, like you said, another shooter. Um, I would love Devin Booker. I don't know stylistically how much he and Cade would really vibe. They, of course, will make it work if it happens, but he's another guy who's from Michigan who wanted to be a Piston. I remember him working out pre-draft for the Pistons, saying how bad he wanted us to draft him, and we passed on him. So I would love to get him over here, um, but I just don't see us giving up enough to do it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I feel personally, just to kind of add on to that, I feel personally Booker is exactly what we're looking for next to Cade, because he can be your primary guy when Cade's off the floor, ball handler, passer, scorer, but he can also be that Klay Thompson type where he can literally just stand at the elbow or in the corner. Cade can do his little dribble moves, pass that ball out, Booker smacks it, and then I just feel they would kind of work perfectly together, stylistically at least. But to both of your guys' point, um, it's going to take quite a bit, and I don't know if I'm willing to give that up.